Welcome to Prism of Torah with Rebbe Saf Aaron Prisman, engaging Divrei Torah, packed with stories and practical insights. Find us wherever you get your podcasts or at prismoftorah.org.
Shalom uvracha. In this week's Parsha, Parshat Shlach, we know the beginning of the Parsha starts off with the Meraglim. The Meraglim were the spies. When Bnei Israel asked Moshe Rabbeinu, please let us go first see that the land is ready to be captured, despite the fact they should have really just taken it and trusted in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that it's ready for us to be taken, but still they requested it. So Moshe Rabbeinu asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he said, okay, if that's really what they want, they could go. So they go in there. And this year I want to emphasize one very unique thing they said that we can learn a lot from. And it says the following. When they came back, they said, whoa, the people living over there in Eretz Yisrael, the Knaanim, the Knaanites, they're huge. And they said the following sentence. The Pasuk says that we were in our eyes like grasshoppers, which means they felt they were like grasshoppers next to these giants. But here comes the second statement, which is very, very interesting. And so too were we in their eyes. And the question begs itself, how could the spies know how they appeared in the Knaanim's eyes, in the Knaanites' eyes? They weren't mind readers. They weren't Nevi'im. Rabbi Sachar Fran teaches an unbelievable concept from here. And I think all of us have a bit of experience with this concept and how important this concept to be used in the right way. And that is the following. When you perceive yourself as a grasshopper, that is exactly how others will see you as well. In short, if you think you are worth nothing and worthless, then that's how others will perceive you as well. The big mistake that many people do is that they think confidence equals arrogance. They think modesty means, I'm worth nothing, just nothing. That's not the truth. That's not modesty. That's a distortion of reality. It is very important that a person recognizes the talents that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him. And kol od he realizes that they are gifts from Hashem and he uses it wisely. That's not a contradiction to him being modest. You can have confidence, self-worth, and also be modest at the same time. It's not a contradiction. If someone has a great voice and is not willing to step up there to be the chazan, if someone is fluent in multiple languages and refuses to help to translate to someone that needs his help, that's not modesty. That's withholding a gift that Hashem gave you. Arrogance is many times when you compare yourself to someone else and you say you're better than him. But knowing the gifts you got from HaKadosh Baruch Hu and using them in the right way, that's not a contradiction to modesty at all. Having the self-worth, realizing what gifts you got from Hashem, that's a very critical understanding to live life the right way, the way you were supposed to live life. Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zatzal, embodied this idea and balanced it perfectly. There's two stories I want to share with you about him that complement each other. Once at a wedding, a young man repeatedly challenged his answers with increasing disrespect. And after several rounds of this back and forth, Rav Moshe took him aside and said, young man, I don't believe you understand who you're talking to. On the other hand, the same Rav Moshe Feinstein, when once he was at another wedding and someone just said, Moshe, can you help me please? He assumed he's talking to him and he just turned around despite the fact he wasn't called Reb Moshe or Rabbi Moshe. He just said, yes, sure, how can I help you? That shows exactly where he was holding. He didn't hold highly of himself in an arrogant way, yet he knew exactly what he has accomplished and what gifts HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him in life. I want to end off with a story, a personal story that I was a part of many years ago when I used to be a project manager in a high-tech company called Amdocs. Dudi was a brilliant young programmer who started under one of my team leaders. He was very young, very new, but despite his exceptional abilities, he always downplayed himself. He was very quiet, sitting quietly in meetings while others presented even his ideas. Amongst them, as I was one of the minority observant Jews, then many in the team, even people above me or below me, often sought my advice, eitzes, trusting my perspective and thinking that I won't be saying anything to anyone. They trusted They trusted me keeping it confidential. One Thursday, our department faced a critical bug threatening a product launch that was very important. Senior developers, they struggled for 2 days with complex solutions. Dudi was in one of these meetings. He encountered this exact issue in his personal projects but thought to himself, I just started here. Who am I to speak up? These people have many years of experience. During lunchtime, Dudi asked me about a personal matter. As we finished, I actually mentioned this week's Parsha. This idea that we're saying, that the spies thought they were being humble, calling themselves grasshoppers, but Hashem had chosen them. Sometimes false modesty prevents us from fulfilling our purpose. That afternoon, as another complicated solution was proposed, Dudi finally had the confidence and self-worth to raise his hands. And he said, I think I've seen this before. It might be a simple configuration issues. Of course, some of the senior developers rolled their eyes, but the team leader said, okay, show us. 15 minutes later, the bug was fixed. It really was simple, something Dudi had solved while learning to code on his own time. That Shabbos, Dudi told me, I realized hiding my abilities wasn't humility. It was selfish. I was depriving my team of help Hashem equipped me to give. Baruch Hashem, 6 months later, I made sure he would be promoted to team lead, having finally stopped being grasshopper in his own eyes. I would like to add a small addition, something that has to do with the current events. It's actually a word in the Parsha I said several times many years ago. It has to do also with the beginning of the Parsha, the Meraglim episode, but also the end. The end of the Parsha has to do with the famous Parsha of Mitzvahs Tzitzis. It says in the Pasuk, V'lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei nechem. Once, a person should not spy after their hearts and after their eyes. And by looking at the tzitzis, it reminds you to do Retzon Hashem. However, Rashi brings a midrash that's very interesting. It goes against the order of the pasuk. The pasuk says, you shall not spy after your hearts and your eyes. However, Rashi quotes a midrash. The midrash says the opposite order. And the midrash says that the way a person sins is that the eyes see something and then they pull you into doing a sin. And then the lev chomed, after your eyes see it, the heart really wants to go ahead and do that, whatever it is, that avera, and then it continues. And the question begs itself, why is it opposite in order of the pasuk? And we answered many times the similar idea. That it's true that physically speaking, what happens first is that your eyes see, and then your heart acts upon it. But from a certain perspective, your eyes are programmed to see whatever your heart perceives. And that's all a matter of working on ourselves. That was also the mistake of the Meraglim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu orchestrated everything in their favor, that they won't realize they're there. He made sure there'll be many funerals. But instead of perceiving that reality, they perceived Eretz Ochelet Yoshvea. This is a country that eats their own people, its own people. The scenario we're in right now is not simple. Unfortunately, people are dying. But at the end of the day, a person has to have the right perspective, knowing that everything's for the best. And at the end of the day, there are many miracles happening and people that are trying to get rid of us, like happens every generation, as Chazal tell us, the amount of miracles. You just have to get your head out of the sand, look around, and realize these unbelievable miracles that are happening, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saving us, and Mirtzeh Hashem will continue to grow in spirituality, care for one another, and in the merit of that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will get rid of our enemies. It is also important to say that as we see Hashem's hand in these events, we must also express our utmost hakaras hatov to those who risk their lives day and night to protect Klal Yisrael. There are different types of soldiers out there who put themselves in harm's way to create the safe environment that we can continue to be Oved Hashem in Eretz HaKodesh. Have a good Shabbos.
This concludes another episode of The Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Eli Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on The Prism of Torah.